All right, so we'll start the next work session. And I don't see anyone else left in the room. So who's on the line to make the presentation?
Good morning. My name is Miriam Halliday, CEO for Workforce Southwest Washington, and I'm joined by my colleague.
Good morning, everyone. Darcy Hoffman. I'm the Director of Business Services at Workforce Southwest Washington with Miriam. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for making the time for us to share a bit more information about this workforce study. And so we're just going to jump right in with just thinking about time. And we do have a few questions for you all at the end, hoping to spark somewhat of a discussion if there's a few minutes left. So high level, we are the Public Workforce Board for Clark, Cowlitz, Wahkiakum County. So Workforce Southwest Washington, commonly referred to as WSW. And we are a part of a regional workforce collaborative. And that regional workforce collaborative is comprised of Work Systems, which is Multnomah, Washington County, and Clackamas Workforce Partnership, which is Clackamas County. We recognize that we're part of a labor shed that is shared, that folks go back and forth across the river for work, and they have for many years. And it's been really important for us to work together to ensure there's consistency in our approach, both with policy, funding development, but also for services for folks when they're looking for work. So we often will, divide and conquer when it comes to big projects such as these, and Workforce Southwest or WSW. So our organization has been chosen to represent our regional workforce collaborative with IBR, the Interstate Bridge Rate Placement Project. Darcy and I, predominantly on the team, have been a part of many of the committees to date, and we will continue to be. I think we all acknowledge this infrastructure project as a massive opportunity for us regionally as it relates to workforce development and economic opportunity. There's a lot of really great jobs that come from these types of projects. And luckily, the IBR group also sees this as an opportunity in the same space. And so they asked for us, they commissioned this report to both give an idea of what is the workforce currently, what is the supply across many occupations, and then what is the projected workforce into the next 5 years. And we have a few other qualifiers, and I'm going to dig in here too on this slide. Thanks, Kristen. I'll let you know when to go to the next one. So what we did, this kicked off about a year ago. We did a survey of labor demand forecasts for regional public capital projects over 15 million, and then over the next 5 years. So just wanting to draw attention there, it's public projects. It's also over a certain budget threshold, and it's also over the next 5 years. And this does not include, obviously, projects that were not responsive when we reached out. So I want to just level set that a lot of the numbers and data that we're going to share and that you can dig into in the report are very conservative. We did an inventory of current labor supply, including analysis of registered apprenticeships. And then we also, in terms of the ways in which we were able to get the information, was a mixture of qualitative, quantitative information. So focus groups, surveys, interviews with industry stakeholders. And we also included professional technical engineering or PTE occupations. Before we go to the next slide, this is one report of many. We have done one similar to this. Really, Work Systems led this charge in partnership with Metro in Portland a number of years ago, and that's what's shown here on this slide. Next slide, please. So our research team was comprised of these organizations, the state, ESD, and OED from both of our states, Work Systems, our workforce collaborative, Portland State University, specifically a woman named Dr. Maura Kelly. She is a lead in this space as it relates to construction projects and workforce diversity, and then also Estelano Advisors. Next slide, please. So our methodology for this project is a mixture of qualitative, quantitative, like I had mentioned earlier. We interviewed and collected project data from 19 public agencies on 107 regional projects. Staffing patterns derived from economic modeling based on national data and informed by industry efforts, or experts rather. We also did an analysis of the current labor market information as it relates to non-residential construction occupations and PTE occupations that I mentioned before, and that includes BOLI apprenticeship data. We did focus groups with 15 apprentices and journey workers wanting to get a good mix of information as it related to direct experience, and then interviewed 10 apprenticeship programs, 4 unions, 2 contractors, and 1 trade association, and 4 higher ed institutions. So giving you just an idea of this is a pretty large group, large collection of data from many different voices. So it's ideally giving us a really good perspective on what's to come. Next slide, please. So high level, what we found for IBR in terms of the existing workforce supply. So approximately 43,000 people work in non-residential construction occupations in the greater Portland, Vancouver metro area. That's of 2022. 5% are women, 26% are workers of color. Employment for those workers of color is largely driven by workers who identify as Hispanic or Latinx. And Black and Asian workers are underrepresented in the trades. Women and people of color are more likely to work in lower paying trades, we also found. One key piece here in terms of this slide and the information in the report, we really go into detail as it relates to demographics across the various occupations in construction, because high level, you know, in terms of numbers for this project or for a supply of a workforce, you're really missing, I think, the opportunity when you dig in and see the gaps of representation as it relates to women who are a little bit over 50% of the workforce, and also individuals of color. And the importance of this as it relates to the report, IBR has stated equity and continues to state equity is as a paramount focus and priority. I sit on their equity committee, and they also have been really digging into how this project can create economic opportunity for everybody in our community, which is going to require very specific approaches based on the communities that they're looking to include in the project. And so as we dig into these slides further, you'll see that we really highlight a lot around demographics as it relates to occupations as well. Next slide, please. Additional, in terms of existing workforce supply, there's a higher share of apprentices who identify as female or non-binary and that are enrolled in a union-affiliated program, about 17% versus 5%. There's also a higher total number of women and non-binary apprentices enrolled in a union-affiliated program, about 506 women and non-binary apprentices in union-affiliated programs and 79 in non-union. Union-affiliated apprenticeship programs also have higher numbers and concentrations of people of color. 29% of active apprentices in union-affiliated programs identify as people of color, compared to 24% in non-union programs. There are more than twice as many people of color in union-affiliated programs, about 881, as non-union affiliated programs, about 415. And apprentices who identify as female, non-binary, and or people of color are more likely to participate in union-affiliated programs. 86% of all female or non-binary active apprentices and 68% of all people of color that are active apprentices in 2023 are in union-affiliated programs. So I felt that this was these are important notes to make as it relates to specific types of programs for projects such as these. Next slide. So in terms of the projected demand, we, from 2023 through at least 2028, the 107 known large public capital projects that are identified in the study will require over 22,000 construction workers. So please just remember, in the very beginning of the presentation, I said this is a very conservative estimate. based off of public projects, those that were responsive when we reached out, and also with those quantifiers around, or qualifiers around 15 million budget, 5-year ahead. Some of those projects have stated apprentice and workforce diversity utilization goals, and they have average goals of 17% apprentices, 21% people of color, and 11% women. So I just want to state that is a common, well, it's something that's been of interest to IBR in terms of having workforce diversity utilization goals, as well as any, generally workforce goals generally across demographics. And so I felt that it was important to show that there's average goals out there of similar projects, not as large, but public projects in the region. And when you look at the deficits across the workforce as it relates to diversification, the analysis shows that the current supply would fall short by about 270 people of color, a little over 1,000 females, 1,290 apprentices to fill the need of all the trades in the region over the next 5 years. And then also that the deficits more accurately show the deep need for additional outreach to training and retention of specific groups, underrepresented groups, for skilled trade career opportunities. An estimated of about 5,900 PTE workers will be needed. And as with the trades, those positions may be filled by a combination of existing workforce and new entrants. And 3 of those PTE occupations account for over half of the demand. So we thought that was important to note. There's office clerks, project management specialists, and civil engineers. And I would say we did find that largely a majority of the public projects in the metro area do not have workforce participation goals. And those that do have those goals struggle with monitoring and enforcing them. So, in terms of staff time, administrative time, agency time, that could be one element, and what's reported to us as an element of being a barrier to implement and upholding those goals. So just to say that as well as it relates to the project. Next slide, please. So in terms of our findings, here. We also found that retention of diverse workers is adversely affected by lower quality training of these workers. They often receive on job site from supervising journey persons, which means that these apprentices are less included in the trades and struggle to excel and advance. We also found that harassment remains a significant issue on job sites, and this includes harassment based on gender and other identities. Harassment of apprentices and disrespect often experienced by all workers. Workers also experience isolation and exclusion. This impacts the industry's ability to retain workforce and recruit future new workforce. And the industry has not yet widely adopted policies or practices that affect or address job site harassment and discrimination incidents. Women and people of color are less likely to have opportunities for advancement within the industry, such as becoming foreperson superintendents or company owners. Like I said earlier, we find an overrepresentation of women and people of color in lower paying occupations and in positions as it relates to this sector. The lack of steady work in the construction industry particularly impacts female workers and workers of color. I know childcare has been a continuous conversation across our region and our state and our country. It definitely plays a part here in terms of folks not having access to quality childcare. And then both the cost of childcare and access, specifically as it relates to non-standard shifts in construction, are a barrier to success for parents. And then lastly, requirements for long shifts, changing schedules, and non-standard work without options for flexibility poses a continuous challenge as it relates to caregiving needs as well. We also found that most connections into apprenticeships still occur through personal networks. And often that recruitment happens through knowing the right individuals or knowing individuals that are already in the field. We found that state certified and pre-apprenticeship programs expose historically underrepresented populations to the trades. screen them for job readiness, and help to cultivate a pipeline of diverse job seekers as it relates to the data I just shared a couple minutes ago around union versus our pre-apprenticeship program, specifically cultivating and providing this support prior to going to an apprenticeship. So one component of that, though, is that these programs have limited capacity. And that limited capacity is largely due to funding sustainability or the lack thereof, and reporting fatigue across the numerous existing funders. Again, a majority of these projects still don't have workforce goals or clear workforce goals, and it really prevents our regional market from adopting diversity in a competitive mindset, which would really contribute to the opportunities and continuity of opportunity for diverse workers in our region. So with that, I'll pass it over to Darcy.
How are we doing on time, Council? Are we okay to keep going? I know we only had about 20 minutes this morning.
Do we have any questions at this point? I mean, the one comment I would make, and this is a great slide for it, it's great to tee up challenges, but I got to tell you, I'm just not bright enough to come up immediately with solutions. So when people say, hey, here are the barriers, it would be great if you could say, and here are some ways to fix it, that the council has some jurisdiction over. So, you know, shifts offered in construction, not flexible or accommodating. What can the county council do about that? You know, so I just asked that, this is a very informative presentation, and we are very much looking for solutions and how we can help. So I would just make that comment. But do other councilors have questions at this point or comments?
I think they had more that they were going to present.
So are there any questions or comments at this point? Hearing none, go ahead. Please continue.
Okay, great. So I'm glad you brought that up. The next half of the presentation really is around the things that we're recommending to the IBR project team that they can do to address some of the challenges that Miriam just laid out for you. And I just wanted to check on time. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if we have potentially 10 more minutes, I will run through the recommendations that we made to the IBR project team. Okay, so if we are good, I think we could go to the next slide. Yes, great. Okay, so meeting the increasing demand for a skilled workforce necessitates coordinated efforts on a regional scale, addressing retention barriers and entry faced by workers often marginalized in the sector. Successful strategies involve participating in regional collaborations to establish diverse worker and apprentice goals, collectively investing in recruitment and retention initiatives, identifying and implementing culturally specific strategies tailored to the unique needs of workers, especially for women and people of color, and addressing the challenge of affordable childcare. With leadership from the federal government as well as locally, the IBR project really has a historic opportunity to incorporate these promising practices into their equity strategies and their community benefits outcomes. So there's 6 recommendations. I will try to buzz through them and just know that all of these recommendations and everything that Miriam has already discussed with you is detailed at length in this report that if you don't already have a link to, we will make sure that you do. So first recommendation, grow a diverse regional construction workforce through multi-jurisdictional collaboration, coordination, and targeted investments. We're recommending to IBR that they make the intentional choice to build up the regional workforce by joining forces with existing successful efforts to eliminate barriers for women and people of color and also justice-involved individuals to access and stay in these quality construction careers. So some of the ways that we might do that, one is to adopt the construction career pathways framework. And I'm going to say just a little bit more about this one in just a moment. Also to embed equity goals into all workforce agreements. The regional workforce equity agreement could be a model for this, and I'll say a little bit more about that one too. And then there's also great examples of multi-jurisdictional work that's happening right here in Washington already. The City of Seattle, the Port of Seattle, King County, Sound Transit, they have a really long history of working together to collaborate on workforce equity initiatives, including project labor agreements and also coordinated grant making. And just quickly going back to the construction careers pathways framework, because I'm assuming this is something that we're all largely unfamiliar with. But the construction career pathways framework, or funder collaborative as we call it, they were convened in 2018 by Oregon Metro, and they're comprised of 16 public agencies that work together to develop a regional approach to recruitment and retention, specifically of women and workers of color in the trades. The framework offers a toolkit with some high-level guidance for public project owners. And then the regional workforce equity agreement is an agreement amongst these government agencies as well as labor union partners, and is essentially the implementation of the construction career pathways framework. And right now it's being used on all capital projects over $5 million in the metro region. So that's something we will dig into a little bit more here in the future. And you can jump to the next slide. And this is just a table that helps illustrate some local public projects that had equity outcomes because of a workforce agreement. So if you can recall back to some of the data points that Miriam indicated in her portion of the presentation around the numbers of women and people of color in the construction trades, these particular projects highlighted that had a workforce equity agreement have just done really well for women and workers of color, including women and minority-owned contractors. Next slide. Second recommendation is to improve retention through addressing job site culture and other challenges. So ways the IBR may do this is to mandate that contractors commit to actively improving job site culture by establishment of zero tolerance policies, robust reporting mechanisms, and consistent implementation of proven positive work environment training. Green Dot and Rise Up are just two job site culture programs that really demonstrated the most success in a recent assessment of all of the various programs that are out there. So those are two in particular that we're seeing some more exploration. Also to invest in project level retention and support to retain skilled workers, and to provide flexibility in work hours to address caregiving and healthcare needs of the workforce. And both BOLI and the state of Washington, specifically the Washington State Building and Construction Trades Council, their Construct a Career initiative, they all offer these types of workforce supports to apprentices. Next slide. Okay, third recommendation is to knock down the barriers that women and workers of color face to grow a skilled construction workforce. So again, we're recommending joining the multi-jurisdictional funders collaborative, which is that construction career pathways framework, to scale up regional workforce planning and investments. We also need to fund and grow comprehensive pre-apprenticeship programs, support services, and retention support that can help the new generation of workers advance in their careers. We need to make affordable, accessible, reliable, and high quality childcare a signature workforce and community benefit of the project. And then also to consider programs like the Priority Hire program out of the city of Seattle, which basically gives hiring priority for those living in economically distressed areas of the city. Next slide. Fourth recommendation, implement effective project administration and procurement strategies. So effectively plan for and resource successful implementation of workforce equity policies within a public jurisdiction. Establish and sustain labor management community oversight committees that can help address challenges and share best practices. and then also to use procurement to ensure contractor compliance on respectful workplaces, inclusion, and anti-harassment initiatives. Next slide. Fifth recommendation, increase communication and education for project managers and contractors on these jobs. So enhance project communication and expectations between the public administrators and contractors, and allocate resources for training opportunities and internal support that's tailored to project managers and focused on advancing equity in the construction projects. And next slide. Last recommendation is around our professional, technical, and engineering, but to continue to explore and address PTE equity opportunities. So we're recommending work with local and state educational institutions, students, and employers to identify the key barriers and solutions to more diversity in these PTE jobs. And then also to fund and grow comprehensive support service programs that are modeled off what we know works in construction and that can help a new generation of diverse workers grow in professional, technical, and engineering occupations. And I think that should be our last slide before we can open it up to a discussion. Miriam, anything I missed or you want to jump in on?
No, I think you did a great job. So Council.
Okay, thank you for that. In answering your question there, for me, I would like to see what is in these agreements and who the signatories are, and then the equity across the entire workforce from not only union but non-union workers, how it applies to all. Those would be my takeaways generally. But let me ask other counselors for their comments or questions.
Question?
Okay, go ahead, Karen.
The second bullet there, what are you most curious about? Do you have a sense that, particularly with the PTE group, that Clark County can provide that workforce? Or is there going to have to be recruiting out of county, out of state, et cetera, for the IBR?
I do. I think between the whole labor market region, between Oregon and Washington, I do have a sense that we likely have the workers. I think the challenge that IBR is really interested in addressing is the diversity of those workers. So like in the PTE occupations, we found that, for example, women are actually overrepresented in the PTE occupations, and unfortunately are highly concentrated like in the lowest wage scale of those occupations. So I think the challenges are they're very similar between the actual building trades and the PTE occupations that need to be addressed. And it really is creating those upward economic mobility opportunities for women and people of color.
Is that it, Karen?
Yes.
Thank you. Sue?
Yes. Thank you, Miriam and Darcy, for this presentation. I guess I just have some comments. I think I appreciate the work that you've done. I think having a baseline of data where things are at right now is important so that you can actually measure improvements going forward. I think that IBR is such an important project that a project of this size does not come around very often, and the potential to improve people's lives in as much as we can find those workers, train those workers from our existing population in Clark County. It's a life-changing thing because these will a lot of these jobs will be high-paying jobs that then will enable people to be able to afford to buy a house, and then you get a generational wealth. So I think the multiplier effect, if we can really enable everyone to have an opportunity to get those jobs. So mostly I just am interested in how we prepare our workforce and how we can support the work that I'm sure you all are going to be doing to help prepare that workforce to be ready for those jobs when they come. So thanks for your work.
Glenn?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Chair Medvedji mentioned some before. What I would like to know is what can we do here as a council? I see all these recommendations, but I don't see anything on here that we can do to help make a difference in this. So I would be looking for that information on what we as a county council can do specifically to help.
Okay, well, thank you. Oh, go ahead. Did you have something you wanted to add?
One thing I wanted to add quickly, we are going to be hosting probably a lunch and learn, maybe it'll be a breakfast and learn. We'll see what time of day it shakes out, but in June, and we're going to be inviting our public partners and would really love for Clark County to be there to come and learn more about the Construction Career Pathways Funder Collaborative. So we'll have our partners from Metro in Portland and some of those other public agencies that developed this framework and toolkit come and talk to our public partners about what it is and some of the success that they found and how you might be able to get involved. And so that is one thing that we would love from the council and from Clark County, is if you would join us to learn more that day. So details to come.
And I'll jump in on top of that. I think we as a workforce board and as a regional workforce entity with our collaborative represent and can provide a neutral convening space around the needs of the massive infrastructure projects like this. And so, you know, the opportunity here with this report is providing, as many of you have stated, a baseline understanding of what we currently can have in terms of labor, and then also somewhat of a projection into the next 5 years. Providing us with this information, providing with you with all this information, allows for us to hold accountable our larger infrastructure projects as well as a region to create those economic opportunities for our community. And so I think accountability here is a component that we're really taking a part in as an organization, and wanting to make sure that this project does actualize true opportunity for folks in our region. And so we'll look to work with you in that space as well, and happy to come back and provide updates as you see fit along the journey over the next, gosh, I don't know, 5-10 years.
Thanks for that question, Glenn. I just want to make one other observation and ask you this question. I mean, a number of years ago, I was able to, and I can't remember if it was the pipe fitters. Anyway, it was the facility for apprenticeships, and it was an incredible program. And provided in an incredible facility. I'm wondering, of these initiatives and recommendations, what they are doing to change the diversity of those that are in the apprenticeship program. And even more importantly for me, man, I would love to see one of those facilities up along our railroad somewhere to create jobs, and also strategically help prepare our workforce for whatever project there is, whether it's the IBR or another corridor, which could be as significant or more so than an IBR project. So, you know, I put that word out to the workforce, those that are managing it and educating it. I mean, that's something this council could really partner with and help to have something like that up here in Clark County. We need local jobs for people that are residents here in Clark County. Anyway, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for this enlightening presentation. We look to hear more as we progress forward and the IBR progresses forward. With that, I think we've concluded our work sessions and concluded our business this morning. We do reconvene at 1. We do have some executive sessions. So until 1, we'll adjourn. We'll be in recess.